Hello, Andre. This is my assignment 4 Game 370 submission. I'm just going to get right into it. So this is my HLSL optimized shader using only one matrix. So I combined the view projection and the world color matrix into one matrix. So I'm only passing in the world view projection matrix into this buffer and the selected color. Um, and inside the vertex shader, I'm only doing one multiplication between the worldview projection and the position. Um, Inside the color 3D selected shader, I just have the single struct, which has the worldview projection matrix and the color vector. And inside the CPP, I have these two functions for sending the cam matrices, as well as this constructor that sets up the layout and the view projection buffer. So when I send the cam matrices, I'm sending the worldview projection. I'm setting the worldview projection, and I'm setting the color, and then I'm updating the resources. Um, and then I just have my set to context function, which sets the input layout, the vertex shader and pixel shader into context. So I'm receiving a call. Then it sets the constant buffer, and if I run this, I'll just go to the DX app and show what's in there. And in the DX app, I set up the world matrix, set up my color selected shader, and in the draw, I set up a view projection matrix and I use my shader pointer to send the camera matrices over. Um, and then I render, and I'll just show how it works. Sorry, I keep getting distracted by my phone. So there's the box, rendered using only one matrix, and in two, it's similar. I'm just rendering um, five boxes using as little matrix multiplication as possible. I believe the HLSL is exactly the same, and then the optimized shader is the same as well, and the only difference is in this one I create multiple world matrices and then use offsets to arrange them in the window. Um, and then in draw, I set up the view projection matrix again by multiplying, and then just repeatedly multiply that by the current the object's world specific world matrix for its position, and that should create 5 boxes, which you can see there. And then for 3 is the textured pyramid. So in my model tools, I have my create unit pyramid and create unit pyramid repeated texture. So in the repeated texture function, I'm setting up all of the vertices and tries with the correct UV maps as if they were cubes, basically, which is why the bottom looks perfect. It looks it stretches, the UV maps stretch to the corners, where on the other ones they get cut in half because it's only triangles as opposed to a full square. So I have 6 triangles total because there's 2 on the bottom, but 4 triangles for each of the sides of the pyramid, and then 2 triangles on the bottom, and I'll show that. So as you can see, I have the texture correctly aligned. It's a little close, but as you can see on the sides, it gets cut off where it would have filled out into a cube or into a square, and on the bottom it's perfect because it is a square. I think that's all there is to go over for that one. For the unit box 6-face texture, it's very similar to the unit box repeated texture and the unit pyramid repeated texture. The main difference is the UV values that you plug in for each of the vertices when creating the unit box, because in order to find the specific positions on the texture map, you have to have the correct values for the UVs. These values were in the slide. I forget which number. I honestly should have brought it up just because it makes a lot of sense when I'm looking at it. But that's the point of these values, just to make sure that the UVs are set up properly on each of these points. And when that's done correctly and all the vertices are ordered correctly, it creates the desired box. So I believe, yeah, so when the T cross is towards me, the B should be upside down and the R should be to my right. So, yep, there you go. Everything is aligned correctly. The T is facing me, B is upside down over here, and the R is correct. Don't believe I had to do much more for this one. In the draw, I'm just setting up the view projection data and the world data and rendering the model. Yeah. And I'm just setting the texture in a demo, setting the texture, setting the world, and then passing it in draw. And then the shader texture class, the last one. This one I had a little bit of trouble with because of this value right here. So I thought I was copying everything over correctly from the init demo and the draw function into the shader texture class. That's basically what this is. It's just taking everything out of the DX app and putting it into the shader texture class, the texture class, and associated functions or associated classes. But I wasn't sure. So if I run it with this hard-coded value of 16, the texture appears perfect. But if I use the it's here. Yeah, there it is. So there it goes. This is the repeated texture, and it appears perfectly. But if I run it with the append align element, which I'm probably gonna have to pull from here. Shader texture. It doesn't show the texture right. It only shows a small portion of it. In the crate texture, it looks even worse than this. This actually looks cleaner than that. So I'm assuming it's taking a small corner of the texture and putting it over each face, and I'm not sure why. I know it has something to do with the layout, and I know hard coding the value isn't the correct solution. However, it was the only solution I could get to work for now. I know I'm missing something. I couldn't figure out where. I combed over this a few times, and I looked on Piazza, and I think some other people had the same issue. So I'd be interested to know if we're all having the same problem. Yeah, so I'm setting up the view projection buffers, the world texture buffer. I have my send cam matrices and send world texture functions. So here I'm sending the world, here I send the view projection matrix, and I have my set to context, which does the set to context automatically instead of doing it all inside the DX app. So in DX app, all I have is setting up the texture, the alignment test texture, and then I create the new shader texture shader. I set the shader to context, and then I set the texture resource and sampler, which should set the texture to context. And then I create a new model and draw it using the shader's send cam matrices function and the send world text function, and then I render the model. And you saw that run already, so that should be good. And then for the further questions, when I'm using the unit box and running all the textures, crate face, cube faces, and test 512, I get one color, and the reason for that is, do I have model tools up here? Okay. So the reason for that is in the create unit box function, there's no UV values set up, so it automatically takes whatever the color is at 00 and fills the entire box with it. So for the crate, I believe that's brown, and then the other two is red and brown, I believe. I can't remember. But there's all solid colors, and it's because there's no UV values, and it's just going to take whatever the value is at 00 and cover the whole box with it. And then for the last further questions, you're supposed to do a performance test. And after running the performance profile, see, my CPU usage isn't very high for any of this. However, the biggest function that's not any of these is the draw scene, which is the one that I believe should have the most CPU usage, and then render a short second. But yeah, this video is going kind of long, so I'll stop it here. Thanks for your time.